The diner buzzed with its usual midday rhythm. Plates clattered, conversations overlapped, and the smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air. At one corner booth, an older black man sat quietly with a plate of food in front of him. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, his worn hat set carefully on the seat beside him. His posture carried both dignity and weariness, the kind that came from years of living through struggles most people in the diner could never imagine. Across the room, Officer Grant, a white policeman with a reputation for being tough on the wrong kind of people, walked in with his chest puffed out. He wasn't there for food, he was there to make a statement. His eyes immediately locked on the elderly man. Something about the man's calm presence irritated him, as if dignity itself was a challenge to his authority. Grant marched toward the booth, his boots heavy against the tiled floor. Without so much as a greeting, he loomed over the table. "What are you doing here?" he barked. The old man glanced up, unfazed. "Same thing as everyone else," he replied softly. "Eating my lunch." But Grant wasn't satisfied. He smirked, leaning closer. "Don't get smart with me. People like you think you can just sit wherever you please, like you belong." The surrounding chatter quieted. Diners glanced nervously at one another, but no one spoke up. They had seen Grant target people before, and most preferred not to get involved. The man, however, didn't shrink under the insult. He placed his fork down gently, meeting the officer's gaze. "I've earned my right to be here, just like you." That simple statement seemed to set Grant off. He grabbed the man's plate and shoved it aside, spilling food across the table. "You don't get to talk back to me," he growled. The old man's calm demeanor never wavered, though his eyes held a quiet sadness. "I fought too long for people like me to sit in places like this. You can push my food aside, but you won't erase that." Grant laughed mockingly. "Fought? Please, what could you have possibly fought for? Men like you don't fight. You hide behind excuses and pity." At that, a hush fell across the diner. Several customers shifted uncomfortably. They could see that the man had endured this kind of treatment before, but this time something deeper stirred. The elderly man leaned back, folding his hands on the table. His voice remained measured, but it carried a weight that made even Grant pause for a moment. "Son, you have no idea who you're talking to." Grant scoffed, though unease flickered briefly across his face. He wanted to believe the man was bluffing, but a nagging thought crept in. What if he wasn't? Still, Grant doubled down, sneering. "Then enlighten me. Who exactly are you supposed to be?" The man gave a faint smile, one born not of arrogance but of lived truth. "I'm someone who's been fighting battles long before you put on that badge." The room grew tense, every eye turning toward the two men. A waitress froze with a coffee pot in her hand, unsure whether to step in or stay out of it. Grant towered over the elderly man, trying to project dominance, but something about the man's calm gaze unsettled him. "You think you're tough because you've been through something?" Grant scoffed. "You're just another old-timer telling stories nobody cares about." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't even flinch. He simply spoke with the kind of quiet conviction that demanded respect. "I wore a uniform long before you did. Only difference is, mine didn't come with power handed to me. It came with responsibility." Grant's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. "What uniform?" The old man reached into his coat slowly, deliberately, so no one would misunderstand his movements. From an inner pocket, he pulled out a medal, tarnished with age but still gleaming with honor. Gasps echoed around the diner as several patrons recognized it instantly. A Medal of Honor, awarded only to the most extraordinary veterans. Grant's face reddened, but he refused to back down. "So what? You think a piece of metal makes you special? That was years ago. Doesn't mean anything now." The waitress who had been frozen finally spoke, her voice trembling but firm. "It means everything. My father served too, and I know what that medal represents. You should be ashamed." Others murmured in agreement, the tide of the room slowly shifting. For the first time, Grant felt the weight of being the outsider. But his pride wouldn't let him admit it. The old man, still calm, placed the medal gently on the table between them. I bled for this country. I watched my brothers die beside me, so men like you could strut around in peace. And still, when I come home, I'm treated like I don't belong. His words carried decades of pain, layered with the strength of someone who had endured it all and kept moving forward. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even those who didn't know the history could feel the truth of it. Grant's jaw tightened, but for the first time he had no insult ready. The confidence he usually wore like armor began to crack. He looked around the diner expecting someone, anyone, to support him. Instead, he saw only disapproval in their eyes. The elderly man leaned forward slightly, his tone unwavering. You see, officer, respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. And right now, all I see is a man hiding behind a badge, confusing fear with authority. The words hit harder than any weapon could. Grant clenched his fists, but he couldn't find a way to strike back. Deep down, he knew there was truth in them. The old man finally picked up his fork again and resumed eating as though nothing had happened. His simple act of continuing his meal carried more defiance than 1,000 shouted arguments. It was a statement, "You can't take away my dignity." The diner's silence weighed heavily as the officer stood there, unsure of what to do next. Grant wasn't used to being challenged, especially not in public. Usually, people cowered or gave in to his intimidation. But this old man wasn't afraid. If anything, his calmness made Grant feel smaller with every passing second. Finally, Grant tried to regain control, his voice louder than before. Don't think you're above the law just because you have a medal. That doesn't mean I can't haul you out of here right now. The old man looked up from his plate, his steady eyes meeting Grant's. Above the law? No. But I've lived long enough to know that you don't understand what the law truly means. Grant stiffened. And what's that supposed to mean? It means, the veteran said, his voice low but powerful. The law is meant to protect people, not be used as a weapon against them. When you treat it like a club to swing at those you dislike, you dishonor the very oath you swore to uphold. A murmur spread through the diner. Several patrons nodded, whispering among themselves. The waitress who had spoken earlier crossed her arms and glared openly at Grant now, her courage growing with the support of the room. Grant's throat felt tight, but he still clung to his pride. You think you know better than me? You don't wear this uniform. He tapped his badge with 2 fingers almost defensively. The veteran gave him a long look, the kind that seemed to cut straight through every excuse, every layer of arrogance. No. I wore one heavier. Mine didn't shine. It carried blood and mud and sacrifice. Yours should carry duty. But right now, all I see is ego. Grant's jaw clenched so hard it ached. His authority was slipping, and he knew it. But before he could muster another retort, the diner door opened. 2 young men in military jackets walked in, their faces lighting up as they spotted the elderly man. "Sergeant Daniels!" one of them exclaimed, rushing over. They saluted instinctively, and the entire diner gasped again. The old man, Daniels, smiled faintly and gestured for them to sit. "At ease, boys. You don't need to salute me here." But the gesture was already done, and its meaning was clear. This man wasn't just some veteran, he was a leader, respected across generations. Grant's face turned crimson. The 2 young soldiers noticed him standing there and immediately recognized the tension. One of them frowned. "Everything okay here, sir?" Daniels gave a small nod. "It's fine, son. Just teaching a lesson." The soldiers exchanged glances, then turned their sharp eyes on Grant. Their presence only deepened the officer's humiliation. Grant felt cornered. Every word he had spoken was unraveling, every attempt to assert power backfiring. And now, not only was the diner against him, but even fellow servicemen, men who had chosen respect over fear, stood ready to defend the older man. For the first time in his career, Grant felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, his authority meaningless in the face of true honor. Grant's hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it by adjusting his belt. His confidence, so loud and inflated when he first entered the diner, was now unraveling thread by thread. Sergeant Daniels calmly sipped his coffee, as though the tension around him didn't exist. His steady composure only made the officer's unease more obvious. "You know," Daniels began, his voice even, "I've dealt with men like you before. Different uniforms, same arrogance. They believe power gives them the right to demean others. But true power is restraint. It's knowing when to raise your hand, and when not to." The words cut deeper than any insult. Grant opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The young soldiers beside Daniels didn't need to add anything. The respect in their eyes spoke volumes. Finally, Daniels leaned forward, his tone quieter now but sharp enough to pierce the silence. "You thought you could walk in here, humiliate me, and walk away feeling stronger. But all you've shown this room is weakness. You've shown them a man more concerned with control than with justice. Tell me, officer, when you go home tonight, will your badge shine as brightly as this medal? Or will you see the cracks you've made in its meaning?" Grant felt his throat tighten. For the first time, he couldn't meet the old man's gaze. The waitress, emboldened by everything she had witnessed, stepped closer. "He deserves respect, and you owe him an apology." Others nodded, voices rising in agreement. "Apologize," someone said firmly from the back. The room pressed in around Grant, not physically but morally. Every face mirrored his failure. His authority, once an unshakable weapon, was gone, replaced with accountability he couldn't escape. Daniels remained quiet now, letting the weight of the moment settle. He didn't demand an apology, didn't need to. The truth had already been laid bare for everyone to see. Grant's chest rose and fell as he fought with himself. Pride screamed at him to walk out, to pretend this never happened. But something else gnawed at him, shame. And with it came the faintest, most unfamiliar whisper of humility. At last, his voice cracked as he muttered, "I was wrong." The diner went silent. Grant swallowed hard and forced himself to continue. "I disrespected you. I disrespected your service. And I disrespected this badge." His hand hovered over it, trembling.
"I'm sorry."
Daniels gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "An apology doesn't erase the harm, son, but it's a start. Just remember, authority means nothing without integrity." The officer lowered his head, then turned and left the diner in silence. No one followed him. When the door shut, the atmosphere shifted. People breathed again, voices rising in relief and admiration. The two young soldiers clapped Daniels gently on the shoulder, one of them smiling. "Still teaching lessons after all these years, huh, Sergeant?" Daniels chuckled softly. "Some lessons never change." He picked up his fork once more and finished his meal, unbothered by the storm that had passed. Around him, respect filled the room, not the kind forced by fear, but the kind freely given. And though he had been targeted, humiliated, and pushed, the elderly veteran left the diner that day not diminished, but exalted. For he had shown everyone there, including the officer himself, the difference between power and honor.